Hey there everybody, thank you for watching, I really do appreciate it. This is the fourth and final video in my multi-part episode on making a counter height chair. In fact, there it is. And here's a sneak preview of the finished product. Basically, I have one coat of tung oil already applied, not quite dry yet. Need to do a little more finishing and certainly put some more coats of oil on it, but this is the finished product. Not bad. But anyway, when we ended part 3, I was just starting some preliminary shaping of the joints. Part 4, the final part, starts with me at the drill press about to cut some countersink holes to attach the front legs. So with that, let's finish it. Okay, I did some preliminary shaping last night of the joints, and so today is glue up day. And I'm going to start by attaching the legs, the front and back legs, to the sides of the seat. And to do that, I'm going to use these 3-inch wood screws. I don't normally use screws like this for attaching legs to chairs, but given the nature of this joint, with it basically going to one side of the seat, I feel more comfortable using screws. I know that there is good long grain to long grain glue surface area attaching it to the seat, but again, it's one-sided. It's a one-sided attachment, so I'm going to use these screws. So what I'm going to do is drill some pilot holes, basically to countersink these screws, obviously. I have a 1/2-inch bit in here, Forstner bit, and what I'll do once I countersink these screws and attach it, I'll make 1/2-inch plugs, probably out of cherry, to cover the screw holes. Okay, my strategy is to start with 2 of the outside legs, attaching them first. Then I'm going to include the stretchers, and then I'm going to add the backrest, and then the other 2 legs. That's my plan. Okay, so the clamps are off, and now I need to start doing the joint transition, shaping the joints. So here we go. I'm going to start with the bottom. Okay, so I finished rough cutting the joints around the stretchers, and now working my way up as I get a little more comfortable with the die cutter up to the top of the leg. Now I'm going to work on this joint here. One thing I wanted to point out, you'll notice what looks like, or it is, these gaps here. It doesn't follow the joint all the way around, but what happened is when I was using the rabbiting bit on my router, I kind of messed up and rounded over the joint as I was cutting out the gap. So you see this here, but if you look at the top, it's the joint's pretty tight. So what I'm thinking about doing, instead of sanding this flush, well, I'll sand it flush, but I might use this bit that came with the set for my little cut saw cutters and kind of trace around this joint, kind of giving it, I'm thinking, like an embossed type look. Either that or I'll round over the seat more and take out the gap that way. I'm not sure. Let me work on it and see, but I'll do one of the two to kind of take that out. This only goes in about 1/8 of an inch, and then the joint's tight again. So yeah, I'll either trace around the joint or I'll round over the seat and take care of that. What I'm going to do now is add a little bit of a profile to the bottom of the seat here. As I said before, since this chair is still going to be kind of square, I don't want to get too round here, but I think a little bit of a profile might make the seat look, or the whole chair look a little less bulky. So I'm going to add like a reference line here as I start rounding, because I don't want to go any farther than that, and we'll probably go less than that, but I just want to have it there as a reference for me as I get started. And while I'm at it, I don't think I want to go on this side beyond that point. Okay, I am basically now satisfied with the overall look of the chair after going through a lot of rough shaping. So now what I'm going to do is a lot of sanding to smooth out the rough shape and then see what I think about it. If I feel like more shaping is needed, I'll do it. But I think for the style I'm going for, I think I'm okay with it. All right. Good morning. This is a new day. I feel like I am getting closer to done. I'm liking how the project is coming out. Definitely more sanding to do. And I still need to work on these armrests. I think I need to take out a little bump there and smooth it out. But I'm liking how this is turning out. So I'm figuring today, hopefully, to get through with all the shaping and sanding. As I said, this is kind of the first round of sanding. But based on how things are looking now, this might be it. Because I am doing a little bit of shaping as I go. Things that are glaring, like this armrest thing, I'll go ahead and take care of that and get back to sanding. But if today I can get the sanding done to a good spot, I may be able to start applying finish later. So we'll see. But first I gotta take out this little bump. All right. I am sure I could sand some more, but I think it's time to call it. What I'm going to do now, I've already taken a damp cloth of some deionized water to sort of wipe off the excess sawdust and raise the grain a little bit. I'm now just going to go over with some 220 grit, a final finish sanding, and I think then I'm going to start applying some finish. Okay, I decided to keep this simple and just use pure tung oil for a finish. I was thinking of mixing in some polyurethane, but I decided maybe next time. I didn't feel like wearing a respirator or going outside, so. All right, so I have my first coat of oil on. Can already see a couple of places where I need to clean up some glue, but I'm gonna let this sit overnight and see about next steps. This might be it. At least enough to wrap this project up so we can review it. All right, so this is the chair. Only has one coat of tung oil on it, so I know I need to put more oil on it, obviously, and I can already see some glue spots that I missed. But I figure that I'm done enough with this project so we can wrap the video up at least and just kind of talk about it. You know, when it comes to woodworking, one question that I know I've gotten a lot over the years is, you know, how'd you get into woodworking? How'd you learn it? One thing, you know, you're always learning, certainly woodworking, that's for sure. But I have to give a shout out to, at least for me, Fine Woodworking Magazine. I know there's many publications out there, but for me, when I wanted to get into woodworking, I subscribed to that. And as you know, as with many publications, there usually is a project in each issue. And so for me early on, what I started doing is making a lot of those projects. In fact, that's actually how woodworking as a business got started for me. You know, I would make these projects, and after a while, my little townhome started getting full of stuff I didn't need. So once it got to the point where I felt the product was good enough, I said I should start selling this just to make room for more. So I started doing that, and it kind of grew, did woodworking shows and that kind of thing, and it picked up. Again, no longer a business, but anyway, that's how it started. But more importantly, though, where I'm going with this is that one of the things I always started doing early on with every project is when I get done, you know, kind of take a step back, look at it, and basically just find my mistakes. Find out what went wrong, what were my challenges, and how can I improve next time. So that's what I want to do now with this project. Now that I've done it, again, for this video, got it done, I'll put some more oil on it, that kind of thing. Let's just kind of talk about what I learned from it that might be helpful to you. So what I wrote down is kind of 5 things that I wanted to kind of talk about with this project. Things that I'm taking away, again, that if I were to make this same chair again, I would want to incorporate into the process. First thing I want to talk about is the seat. As I mentioned early on in this project, one of the things I really like about Sam Maloof's woodwork, at least in the chairs, is the seat. So, as I said, one of the things I wanted to do with this project is figure out some way to incorporate that type of seat into a chair design of my own. And I talked about in one of the episodes an article I found in Fine Woodworking, an old article that Sam wrote titled How I Make a Rocker. And in that article, he describes cutting out most of the waste in the seat by freehand using a bandsaw. And that's kind of how I did it. Again, I've never done it before, and perhaps I could practice and get better, but there were 2 mistakes that came from that, and I have an idea as to how I would fix that next time. Let me show you what I'm talking about. when I started removing waste on the bandsaw for the seat, I got the centerpiece cut out pretty well, I thought, because that I sat flat on the bed on the bandsaw and just cut out the scoop. But as I got towards the edge, where I'm holding the piece at an angle, guiding it past the blade, I took out material too far on the end. Now I used some wood putty there to fill it in. You can kind of see some of the glue there I have to take out. But, I was eyeballing the angle to cut from here to there, and I messed up there. I fixed it, but it was so far to the edge, I couldn't really sand that off. I could have rounded it off and gotten rid of it, but that's one thing. And there's a tiny nick on the other side, but this is the biggest nick that happened as a result of how I, misguided the piece as I was pushing it past the blade. Now here is, I put this together on SketchUp. This is just a rough outline of a seat blank. And the X there, the red X, marks the center board that I cut out on the seat. This board here, the center board. And as I said, cutting that out, I laid the board flat on the table for the bandsaw, and I think I did a pretty good job of cutting it out. If I used this method again to make this chair, I would do the same thing with the other two boards on either side of the one with an X. I would lay it flat on the table for the bandsaw and just take out the rest of that material with the shaper, with the grinder, and not try to take out as much with the bandsaw. That way I would know that I wouldn't make that mistake. That's one option. And if you go online and look for, just Google Sam Maloof furniture and start looking around for joint ideas and seat ideas, you might find something like this, which I did. Again, I put this together on SketchUp, really rough. This is another idea that one might use to start with a seat blank that's better shaped than just a flat board. And there's all sorts of ideas I found. I'm sure I could figure out or develop a clamping jig to do this. But when I look at this design, as I'm sure most of you might have the same feeling, my concern would be the piece buckling when clamping. Again, I'm sure I could get around that with a jig, but if I was just making one or two chairs, is it worth it to make a jig for that? I don't know. Again, I might go back to the other design I talked about and just lay the boards flat on the bandsaw table and just accept the fact I'm gonna have a little more waste to take out with the grinder, but I won't have to run the risk of cutting out too much on the bandsaw by trying to freehand it. Next thing I'm going to talk about are the armrests, how they connect to the legs, both on the front here and on the back. And actually, now that the oil is on it, it doesn't look as bad as it did yesterday, to me anyway. But as you saw when I made the chair, I just added tenons here and on the back, connecting the armrest to the legs. But you can see that line. I mean, it's not awful. Like I said, now that oil has kind of gotten in there. There's some glue line there. But that could be a little cleaner. Maybe you can see it more on the inside. Right there, probably could have sanded it more too, but that glue line. Basically, what I want to say is I used a pretty good size tenon here. And because I did that, there was no good space for me to put like a screw down the top of the arm of the armrest, either there or in the back, to screw clamp it. Screw clamping, as I did with the legs, can be a good idea and used well. And what I could have done basically is I could have used a smaller tenon, something like this, versus this, and I could have offset it instead of putting it right in the center, offset it such that I could have used a long screw to make a better joint. Because you might remember, as I was making the chair, the way I clamped this is I put a clamp like right here to push down on it. It would have been better, obviously, putting force right here to clamp this down, but I put the clamp here. So again, I could possibly offset the tenon and put a screw there to screw clamp it, pay a little more attention to this joint, and get rid of this line. So that's one thing on the armrest. Actually, for this armrest, again, you can see a little better here what I'm talking about. That glue line. That obviously can be cleaned up. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the leg joint, this leg joint. In the episode where I did this, I shared with you an article that I found online on how to make this joint, which worked out fairly well. But if I did it again, there are some things I'd do differently. This is actually a better illustration of what I'm talking about. In the article that I shared with you, it talks about using a 5/8 inch roundover bit to create the profile for the leg, let's say in this area, and a 3/8 inch rabbiting bit to create the profile for the socket. Let's see if you can, get this. And you could ignore this thing here. I was trying to do something earlier with a pattern, and that's irrelevant. But this piece here is where you would use the rabbiting bit. And again, it basically works fine, but you can see here where I traced out the actual sides of the leg. I mean, it fits in here, but you can see the gap down there where the leg is not fully seated. And it's because this angle right here is not perfect. Now, I got it to work, but one thing I didn't show in the video is I spent a lot of time making this joint fit. More time than I wanted to, such that if I did this again, I would take this in two parts. I would make sure first that this part seats well, and then worry about this part, you know, fitting in, the chair fitting properly. The reason being is that if you cut both joints fully, separately, at once, you know, you cut the leg, the round over, and the joint that fits into the seat, and cut likewise a notch in the seat. As you're fitting this leg together, if you encounter this gap, which I did, given how this joint, just given the design of the joint, you have no good way of knowing if this gap is because of the angle, or is it that the joint here is not fitting. So you're spending a lot of time inching up on it to get it to fit. Again, I got it to work. Perhaps you could use a file or something here on this, again, for one chair, but I feel I spent more time on this than would be ideal, such that if I did it again, I would try to approach it differently, basically. Again, if you look at the joint here, and there. Again, I got it to work, got the seat, but as I said, I spent more time on that than I think I should have. And this here is an easy mistake for me to fix. Basically, when I was guiding the piece in to cut out that notch, I ended up rounding over a couple of the outsides of the leg, and I elected not to just shave off the leg and add a profile there. I decided instead to kind of just carve this out and make it an almost embossed type look, as I mentioned in that episode. But yeah, that was just me allowing the bit to round over the sides of the seat. So I did it all the way around to kind of hide it. Next thing I want to talk about is these joint transition pieces. You'll recall during the project, I attached all the way around 1/2-inch pieces of cherry to allow me to make this transition. And I did that in this project because I wanted to minimize waste. I decided to do that instead of starting with a larger leg blank and then using a template to cut these pieces out. And again, I'm okay with that for this project, but in doing that, you can see, the glue line here and there. That perhaps I could have gotten rid of. There's no amount of sanding to get rid of that, just based on the nature of how you're shaping it. So if you don't want to see a glue line there, I would perhaps start with a larger leg blank. Again, if I was going to commit to this style, this is more of a prototype to see if I want to make 2 more. But if I were going to commit to this style, I might go ahead and start with a larger leg blank and cut this out as a solid piece for the stretchers and not try to just add on pieces of cherry to make this like curved joint look. And lastly, if the oil were dry enough, I'd sit down and show you, I would just make the seat perhaps 1 inch wider. It's comfortable. I like it, especially the way it's carved out. I really like the seat, the way it feels. But about 17 inches opening there. I mean, I'm a fairly big guy, but not that big. And I think perhaps 1 inch wider would make it a little better. All right, thank you for watching this series. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that you found this useful. If you did, please subscribe to my channel so you can get notifications of future content. And bye for now.